All right, moving on. We are going to watch a Stranger Things by Nerdrotic, which is apparently all the rage right now. I think a lot of people are waiting for the second coming, which may or may not happen. Well, technically, that might have already been coming past the date that they wanted, so maybe they made another one. Never know. Hope springs eternal, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I love your face.
Yeah.
You know what? Completely unrelated. I had a weird dream where I'd met Richard Dawkins last night, and for the life of me, I cannot remember what we talked about. But that would have been interesting.
Best season ever!
What does it mean to be happy? Really?
Yeah, it's I hope the audience.
Like, I gotta be honest, the like when everyone had to be like, and it won't, and me, and me, and me. I was like, is that gonna work?
I just saw my ending and thought, oh, and then I walked away very slowly.
I think.
You know what's weird? This guy isn't gay. Sorry. It's terrible, like completely prejudice. But you're just looking at him like he has the most feminized features ever. It might be something he doesn't try at all. But yeah, I think he's apparently straight. I think he's like a metrosexual or some weird crap like that, where he actually would wear dresses or something. I don't know.
The fans are reading too much into it.
Good voice though. Again, look at it. Like, if you were going for masculinized features, he did not win the lottery there.
Read too much into it.
Okay. Hair. No, he's trying that. He is definitely trying that.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
I am in, I think, Stranger Things 5. Haven't seen it.
The series finales that have disappointed us over the years, this is something Matt and Ross and I have talked about, because those are heartbreaks. When you invest in characters and story for years of your life, and then they fail you at the end by being either tone deaf to what brought you to that moment or disloyal to the spirit that made you love that storytelling. I
guess maybe one of the things I think they do really poorly in Hollywood these days is that the notion of like relationship tracking, like where a person's like, where the character's relationships remains either a constant, or you can track how and why and where it changed to what it is at this point in time. But it feels like they kind of, I don't know to what extent they actually do that. It feels like sometimes like the relationship becomes this for no reason apparently, and then it becomes this for no reason apparently, and then it becomes like, yeah, I don't know, or just unjustified changes that happen in people's relationships. I don't know. It feels like all in all they just do a bad job of it. They fired all the good ones. Probably because of sexual misconduct or something. I'm not for sure what all happened. Probably all the good ones were actually on drugs or something. I don't know.
That's such a bitter disappointment, and it sticks with you.
I hate all of this.
Nerdrotic.com.
Greetings, you over 1 million hellions and the 40% who haven't subscribed yet. After waiting 3 full years for Stranger Things Season 4 and then another 3 years, Stranger Things Season 5 has finally arrived. And if you're not sure whether or not Stranger Things is important to Netflix or not, Season 5's reported budget is between $400 and $480 million. That's almost $500 million to you and me, and roughly $50 to $60 million per episode.
Well, it was a weird thing. Is they're still making like pretty good movies for like orders of magnitude less than that. So like I don't know, like I've heard the theory put forth that they will use whatever amount of money you'll give them, and I think that's probably more or less correct. If you give them $400 million, they will use that for the budget. Like they're not gonna penny pinch if they don't have to. They're not going to come up with any new or innovative technique if they don't have to. If they can just throw money at it and fix the problem, they'll do that because that's obviously the easiest solution.
Currently, there's a movie out in the theaters right now, Avatar 3 Fire and Ass, that will probably be at $1 billion by the time this video is released, and the only thing anyone's talking about is Stranger Things. But it might not be in the way Netflix hoped, including unintentionally creating the most memeable moment of 2025.
I think that's the one where they have like an obscenely long coming out scene with Will. I think everyone was kind of ragging on that, even gay people. It's like, oh, sweet glory. Really? You had to do that?
5 and slipping it in the end.
Truth is, I am different. I
Now, many are comparing it to Game of Thrones Season 8, which may or may not be a fair comparison. Stay tuned to the end of the video. Because as HBO, George R. R. Martin, and Dumb and Dumber found out, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Am I right, ladies? At least Game of Thrones was a quality show for multiple seasons, and the same cannot be said for Stranger Things. Because things with Stranger Things are strange. Without a doubt, it's a cultural phenomenon. The closest thing Netflix has to a water cooler show, and maybe the last of its kind. It's strange because it's one of the few and rare Netflix shows that actually gets past a second season. And despite Netflix's ADHD release...
For the record, I never even watched Stranger Things. It's a thing that I missed completely, and I don't think I will, honestly. It's too out there. I guess, like, the kind of, like, what is the other one? The X-Files? The kind of, like, almost liminal sci-fi type things. Not Fringe. Was it Fringe? There was one with like a blonde chick back in the day that I watched some of that was kind of in that same category. It's just kind of like a weird, almost sci-fi-esque type thing. Yeah, I think it was Fringe, actually. Like, I didn't necessarily hate it, but I just don't know if I like that type of... It's like a type of sci-fi that's not really codified, where it's just like weird stuff happening or something. It feels like this is kind of in that category almost. There's no rhyme or reason to like what's happening or almost rules to the world, it feels like. And I don't know if I really like that.
Strategy that, believe me, we'll get to. It is one of the very few shows that's not only been able to maintain popularity, but actually gain it, which again is strange considering no one would say that this has been a consistently good show, and no one would call it high art. A cynical point of view would be that it's just Nostalgia Bait, the TV show, an 80s greatest hits album done by a cover band.
Ghostbusters. They even have a black kid.
Released at a perfect time when 80s nostalgia was hitting the cultural zeitgeist. Nostalgia Bait, the show.
That's one I should actually watch sometime. I never watched the original Ghostbusters or anything like that.
Or not, what they did well. As somebody who grew up in the 80s, they really nailed the look and the feel. But what it did best was its character work. Everyone rooted for Hopper, Joyce, Eleven, Michael, Lucas, Dustin, Jonathan, Nancy, and yes, Will. And the show was at its best.
You know, also, weird thing, I thought this somehow originated with a movie, like a literal movie. But I guess not. I think this was actually, like, it was just originally a series that, you know, came along.
When they had an antagonist to focus on, like Brenner or Vecna, in a setting that gave Gen X everything they love, including but not limited to the music, the malls, the roller rinks, the skateboards, the BMX bikes, the comic books, the video games, the parents that smoked. It borrowed heavily from Spielberg movies and Stephen King books, conspiracy theories like MK
The parents that smoked.
Ultra, and Stranger Things significantly fueled the Dungeons and Dragons resurgence.
And the parents that smoked.
1 was magnificent. Season 2 regressed but had a good ending. Season 3 was corny and ridiculous. And even though they got...
That's kind of cool. And did I mention the
repetitive with things like Joyce going from crazy lady putting lights around the house to crazy lady putting art around the house, and regressing Hopper from an earnest character on a redemption arc to a complete buffoon. Mainly Michael, Steve, Dustin, Lucas, and Season 2 Nancy held it together. But Season 4 was a return to form, and that had everything to do with the 2 missing elements from Stranger Things thus far. Proper 80s metalhead representation with Eddie, and an antagonist that would finally put a face on the evil of the Upside Down, Vecna. Admittedly retconned in later on because everything they were doing with the Mind Flayer wasn't going anywhere. And it worked, and it also didn't hurt that somehow Brenner returned, and somehow Hopper returned. The adults were separate.
It just, like, I feel like one thing that they quite often do, especially in an effort to make female representation seem awesomer, is that they kind of they make all the male characters kind of somewhat either goofy or immature or just incompetent in general. It's kind of a broken record, but I feel like that is something they almost have to. In order to never mind. But it does feel like that's kind of a thing they do. They leave the movie bereft of any competent male characters in order to make the women powerful.
Separated from the children going on their little Russian adventure, and the kids were separated. There was Team 11, where she was trying to get back her powers, Team Byers with Michael and Argyle, who were trying to get back home to Hawkins and find Elle, and Team Eddie, where Dustin and company were trying to protect him from a town that thought he was committing all the grisly murders. And season 4 accomplished a lot. Eddie
Isn't that the guy from Fantastic Four plays Johnny, I thought?
became a fan favorite. They made Max likable, and it put Kate Bush back in the charts. Unfortunately, two of the characters that were doing a lot of the heavy lifting for season 4 died, Brenner and Eddie. Ultimately, at the end, though, our team did get back together. And it's at this point you would think the writers of Stranger Things would do a time jump, considering it took 3 years to get the season out. And it's not just a show, it's a Netflix show starring children. But after our ever-growing team of heroes gets back together, they view a Hawkins that has...
Here's a question. Were bowl cuts ever, like, normal or not weird? I can't say I've ever gotten one, but I just don't know if I ever really liked the look. It looks like those monks they had back in the day where they'd shave a patch on their pate and then they'd have the rest of it a bowl cut. It's just kind of strange.
Has been completely split open, and as they stare off into the distance, it
or Amish.
Looks like all hell is going to break loose and the final battle is upon us, which would make a time
That looks kind of baller.
jump impossible. And how did they start season 5? With a time jump. No, not one that was long enough to sufficiently explain all the characters aging, but it was one to sufficiently explain all that quarantine weight Hopper put on. And that's really the only thing that's sufficiently explained in part 1. Because after 3 years and $480 million, allowing the Duffer Brothers more time to do things like bring our characters to a somewhat satisfying conclusion while thoroughly explaining the Upside Down and finishing Vecna's origin, culminating in a thrilling conclusion. Instead, we got hour-long episodes that's pretty standard for streaming.
This is actually something like the whole notion of explaining exactly how things happen. It can work sometimes if you actually have a good explanation, a satisfying one. But it feels like quite often, if there is some plausible explanation for it, then you don't really need to explain it. You can leave that part out and just let people fill that part in with their heads. I've mentioned this before. Like with regards to books, at least, the reader is doing a lot of the work. And again, it feels like if there is a plausible explanation for it, in fact, if there's multiple of them, you can let the reader do their own thing with it. You can let them explain it how they want to in their own heads. So leave it to their own headcanon to fix all the little plot holes or something. But it feels like sometimes you try to get into the nitty-gritty of it, and it just gets worse and worse.
That managed to be way too long and slow and feel rushed all at the same time. Season 5 starts out with a flashback, one of many this season, going back to the night Will was abducted, and we find out that the Demogorgon was instructed specifically to find Will by Vecna. That's obviously how they had it planned all along. An explicit horror scene that led to some political pundits who don't normally cover pop culture to misread this scene as SA over just plain old assault and express outrage. And it's not like Netflix hasn't earned this reputation, but this one was premature because they were portraying an older male monster who was pure evil, victimizing younglings. A rare, unintentionally accurate portrayal from Netflix. But like I said, it's premature because later on they'll have something to legitimately complain about. But after that, we're back into present day in the timeline, 1987. And that's right, at the end of season 4, after looking off in the distance at the apocalypse, everybody just must have went back home. But now that I think about it, remember Agent Stinson who dropped off Joyce and Hopper at the end of season 4? I guess she didn't notice the apocalypse and just kind of f***ed off. Anyway, it's 18 months later in Hawkins, Indiana, and the entire town is under quarantine, and nobody gets in or out without the military's leave. This would be international news. How does the rest of the world feel about it? No idea. This is something that could probably be explained with a couple of expository news clips. It's not like the Duffer Brothers haven't done this in previous seasons, and I am bewildered why...
I guess I don't know. Maybe they didn't know how to resolve it, but it feels like you should never waste a good crisis like that. Like, those are the parts that you would almost want to focus on, the points of the most contention or the most upheaval. Like, no one writes a story about someone spending a week at their home uninterrupted with, like, you write stories about when it all goes kind of tits up, right? That's kind of the whole point of stories. You don't write stories about mundane things.
They didn't do it here, considering how expository this show is. But we do get some assorted details from, you guessed it, an exposition scene from Rockin' Robin, who's now a DJ and one of the main characters of the show. She tells us that Hawkins is essentially a military state, and the reason for a quarantine after what was a natural disaster is due to all the upside-down dandruff everyone was breathing in. There's mandatory medical checks, there's no go zones, and all those cracks in the earth that formed around Hawkins where the hordes of the upside-down were most assuredly about to come out of at the end of season 4, well, they just covered them up with metal plates. And never mind the fact that this is Rockin' Robin's 500th episode and she's giving the town...
That's weird. Why don't you just... Again...
people of Hawkins a bunch...
Why would you let a crisis go to waste?
Of information they already know. This was clearly for the viewer. But essentially, things are just back to normal, and at least Robin got to slip in that she's going on a date, one that, unbeknownst to the citizenry of Hawkins, would be a lesbian date.
You're gonna feel your life change forever. Just kidding.
No,
One gummy, you're gonna feel chill and mellow. 2 gummies, you'll feel euphoric but not overwhelmed.
The Byers now live with the Wheelers. Lucas is still sad because Max is still in a coma. The actor playing Lucas is still sad because he went from a primary character to a supporting character.
Okay, here's another one. When did this become a thing? It's not like an afro. It's not a high top fade. It's just... What would you call that? Sorry, I'm not up on black culture. What is this? Maybe that is a high top fade. I don't know.
Purpose is just to be worried or sad about Max. Speaking of sad, Dustin is still upset that Eddie died. So are we. R.I.P. Nancy's gone from an intrepid reporter who was pretty good with guns into a brilliant military tactician. Jonathan is still useless, whiny, and gayer than Will. Will is still gay. Michael still doesn't know Will is gay. Hopper in his quarantine weight is training Elle in a montage scene that they probably should have left to the stunt woman. Joyce just stands or sits around looking concerned. And it's at this point I'd like to remind you that it's only been 18 months since the end of season 4. That's right, 18 months for Elle, Michael, Lucas, Dustin, Will, and a particularly rough 18 months for Robin. And because it's the final season, and God knows this show needs it, we're introduced to more new characters like Timothy McVeigh and a new batch of evil military guys. And the person who will eventually become the fearless leader of this Special Forces unit in 1987, a woman, played by Linda Hamilton, playing a man, trying to outdo her...
It looks like the lady from... what is it? Come on. Murder, She Wrote.
Insufferable performance as the anti-natalist Sarah Connor in Terminator Dark Fate, and she pulls it off. Never mind the fact that a show that's supposed to be in the 80s has completely forgotten that women weren't commanding special forces in 1987. Then there's our brand new primary...
Alternate timeline.
Protagonist who technically isn't a new character, but she might as well be, the recast Holly Wheeler. Who? You know, Mike and Nancy's cute little sister who was last seen playing with a light bright in season 4. And arguably the best character of season 5, dipshit Derek.
I'm not dipshit Derek anymore. I'm delightful Derek.
And no, I'm not worried at all that they're adding to an already bloated cast, and I'm sure it won't get in the way of things like properly explaining the mechanics of the Upside Down and Vecna's origin, and leading to things like a rushed ending to get to a prolonged epilogue. Now, normally I think Netflix's recent release strategy with their bigger shows breaking them up into parts is the worst compromise between the binge model and releasing them weekly. But in this case, in theory, I think releasing it over Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's was pretty smart, as long as they focus on the core group and don't waste a bunch of time on characters they introduced in later seasons, or running around on meandering cockamamie plans that are occasionally interrupted with some forced heart-to-heart and an exposition dump for the secondary viewers. What is secondary viewing or second screening?
It's one of those things where it feels like if you try to do too many things, you can't do any of them effectively. If you try to do a few things really well, you can do that. Sometimes you just have to specialize. Anyways, that's Nerdrotic. Strange Things, whatever, blah, 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 blah. You can look it up if you want to.